Welcome everybody to the very first episode of Rated T, the Tacoma Film Connection, showing how your favorite movies tied to the city of destiny. So episode 1 is David Lynch's 1984 movie Dune, based off the novel by Tacoma's own Frank Herbert. And joining me is Elizabeth Weaver.
Hi everyone.
So Elizabeth, what do you have going on?
Oh God, it's been so busy, just hectic. A lot of hand washing and walking our dog.
Walking our dog, excellent. And been watching a lot of movies during the coronavirus quarantine.
A lot of movies. There have been a lot of movies, a lot of shows. Yeah, we've watched a lot.
All right, so Dune. Just your initial thoughts when watching the movie. What do you got?
What the is going on? What is happening? And just that continued. Until the credits rolled.
Yeah.
But kind of in a great way, I would say.
You know, the floating fat man is very weird. Sting and this weird Speedo.
So, gut reaction to Dune, the film by David Lynch.
It's weird. It seems like, even though I haven't read the book, I know a lot of stuff was cut out because I was like thoroughly confused and what the hell is going on. But it captivated me the entire time. So what else stuck out from the movie? I mean, we got Patrick Stewart, taking a pug into battle.
Yeah, well, there's no other way to go into battle, obviously. Without Patrick Stewart or without a pug, you really can't do that.
Why even fight?
Why bother? But yeah, no, I think the thing that struck me the most, although this is not atypical for science fiction of all genres, but a lot of strong female characters. Most of the characters did not fit into a typical character archetype, I guess.
All right, so a little history about Dune. There's a bidding war between a bunch of different directors, and then finally the producer, Dino De Laurentiis, big producer in the 70s and 80s, ended up going with David Lynch over a couple other people. It took 3 years to film, and it was done all in Mexico City. Or 3 years from start to finish to complete. 6 months of principal photography and then 6 months of special effects work. Some of it does seem a little bit dated, but some of it to this day is absolutely amazing. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think there were many moments where I wondered how they did that. It kind of gave me that childlike wonder of, I hate to say it, but watching Star Wars as a kid and sort of like being introduced to all these different worlds and technologies and life forms. That like aesthetic of each kingdom, I guess, the different feudal kingdoms, like they all had this sort of aesthetic of their own, and it was like every single detail was covered. I'm just thinking of when the emperor meets with that weird squid guy and he's like hauled in by guys covered in ornate garbage bags. It's just every detail was touched and every detail fit the world they were supposed to be living in. So that's pretty incredible.
David Lynch got this movie after doing Eraserhead and The Elephant Man. But he seemed like an unlikely pick for directing this movie. He never read the book, despite writing the screenplay.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
He had the help of 2 other guys as well. And he said he was never even interested in science fiction. So what do you think about his take, knowing some of his other movies that he's done, his take on science fiction?
I mean, I guess maybe in a weird way he was a good fit, because when I was researching, I read that Frank Herbert intentionally made it so that even though it was science fiction, technology was not necessarily the focus of the film. He has said that the book was really about the human condition. So perhaps in some weird way that was a good marriage, because Lynch is not into the typical sci-fi.
Right.
And this is maybe not your typical sci-fi, even though it's sort of become, one of the most known sci-fi books in the world, I think, of all time.
Yeah.
Perhaps. So in a weird way, maybe it was a good marriage, but maybe not so for David Lynch.
Yeah. So David Lynch has actually disowned this movie. Ooh. He did not like it at all. And you can tell, from watching some of his other movies that he didn't get final cut. That's something that in the future he demanded. And you can tell he gets it from his movies. But I didn't think it was as bad as maybe he thought it was. So it never lost my attention, despite being kind of weird and I don't get it and I'm lost. I was captivated the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely.
By milking this smooth little cat's body, you receive your antidote.
Frank Herbert, born in Tacoma in 1920. Didn't find out exactly in Tacoma where he was born, so we're just going to go ahead and say South Tacoma.
Yeah, I would assume historic South Tacoma.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that level of genius.
Only from South Tacoma.
Yeah, I don't know where else you would. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So he lived in Tacoma and also Oregon. And when he was in Oregon is where he actually started at least getting the ideas for Dune based off, like, literally sand dunes, in Oregon. All right, so what can you tell us about Tacoma's influence on Frank Herbert?
Well, what was interesting to find out after watching Dune was that one of the biggest impacts that our beloved Tacoma had on Herbert was his experience of pollution and ecological damage from the Asarco plant, or Asarco, I'll check my notes now. Yeah, it's a mining, smelting, and refining company. So he saw the ecological impact that had on Tacoma and surrounding areas, and that's sort of what spurned his inspiration for Dune, which was surprising. Yeah.
In this time, the most precious substance in the universe is the spice melange.
But sire, we can't leave all this spice.
So the Asarco plant ended up getting shut down in 1985, just 1 year before Frank Herbert's death, and 1 year after David Lynch's movie came out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What a turn of events.
Yeah. It got cleaned up and it became Point Defiance Park, specifically the Dune Peninsula at Point Defiance Park. In 2019, that whole place opened up. So you have the Wilson Bridge that connects Point Defiance to Dune Peninsula.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's the Frank Herbert Trail. So it's not the Frank Herbert Park, it's Dune Peninsula at Point Defiance Park, which... So what do you think about that?
I think Herbert should be pleased. I mean, it's a beautiful space, and if the man loved nature and loved our local community, then, I mean, who wouldn't be delighted? He doesn't need his own park. Tacoma's a community. We're not about individuals, David Lynch.
So you don't think it should be the Frank Herbert Park?
No.
Dune Peninsula at Point Defiance Park is good.
I think it's good. And the Frank Herbert Trail.
Yeah,
Go walk with Frank.
We got the Frank Herbert Trail, so...
I'd love a trail. I'd love a trail on my death.
David Lynch's Dune. What would you give it out of 10? How many stars?
Out of 10, I would say a solid 7. And I think the only reason I detract a few points is because, like you've already said, you get the sense that you're not getting the whole story. Like, you don't feel brought along. And at first I was like, oh, is this an artistic choice? Like, it's just this weird. But knowing that it was cut down from what Lynch wanted and ultimately didn't play out the way he wanted, that makes sense, because as you're going through, you're like, oh, this is just getting more complicated. I mean, there would be 5 scenes in a row where I didn't even understand the relationship dynamics in any 5 of those scenes. Out of 10 stars, how many would you give Dune?
I would also give it a 7 out of 10 because, yes, it's very weird, but I was captivated the entire time. I was never bored at all, and I would watch it again, for sure. The reason I'm taking off 3 stars is because you could tell that there was a battle between the producers and the director, and what they inserted, all that exposition in the beginning, all the voiceover by the main character. So that's why I'm taking it off 3 stars. But overall, not a bad movie. It doesn't deserve all the hate that it gets.
It doesn't deserve all the hate that it gets. That's confounding. I don't understand.
So, and David Lynch, give it some credit. Maybe revisit it.
Now we're just picking at old wounds.
Yeah. But, all right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of Rated T.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to have you back in future episodes.
I'll check my schedule.
Okay. All right, everybody. Adios.